Number 1. Stay calm and composed. When you find yourself in the middle of a heated exchange with someone who's on the offensive, it's easy to let your emotions take the wheel. But if you really want to disarm them and make them regret their aggressive tone, staying calm and composed is your secret weapon. It might sound simple, but it's incredibly powerful. In fact, it's the cornerstone of a lot of Stoic philosophy, and for good reason. First, let's talk about why this works. When a person is angry, their mind is clouded with emotion. Their words are coming from a place of heightened sensitivity and frustration. Now, if you match that intensity, the situation only escalates. You're feeding into the storm, making it harder to find calm waters. On the other hand, when you remain composed, you're effectively grounding yourself in reality. You become a calm oasis in the middle of their emotional chaos, and that alone can have a huge impact on the way they perceive the situation. It's not about being passive or shutting down, it's about choosing not to let their anger dictate your behavior. Imagine you're facing someone who's raising their voice, pointing fingers, and using sharp words. You could easily fall into the trap of defending yourself or matching their tone. But if you hold your ground and speak with measured calmness, your words carry a quiet weight. You're not panicking, not reacting in haste, and that calmness can be incredibly disarming. It creates a space where the other person can start to see the absurdity of their own aggression. Being calm also gives you the upper hand in controlling your own emotions. When you stay composed, you're not reacting from a place of fear or frustration. You're choosing how to respond, not just reacting automatically. This shift in control can make all the difference. You don't have to fall into the trap of defending every word or trying to justify yourself. By staying calm, you show them that their anger doesn't faze you, that you're in charge of the situation. It can even cause them to pause and reflect. Now, let's dig into how you can keep that cool. It starts with recognizing your own internal reactions. It's almost like you're observing yourself from the outside. Are you feeling your heart race? Is your breath getting shallow? Recognizing those physical signs of rising tension is the first step. Once you're aware of them, you can take control, slow your breath, relax your muscles, and focus on keeping your thoughts clear. It's like flipping a switch in your mind to pause and think before reacting. It's a form of mental discipline that Stoic philosophy teaches, learning to control your reactions, not just your actions. And here's a bonus: when you stay calm, you're setting a standard. People begin to expect that level of calmness from you. It's like building a reputation for being someone who doesn't get rattled. That alone can make aggressive people think twice before trying to push your buttons again in the future. So, next time you find yourself facing an aggressive person, don't just react, pause, breathe, and remain steady. It's one of the most effective verbal tricks you can use. Not only does it protect your peace of mind, but it also sends a clear message: aggression doesn't faze you. It shifts the power dynamic, and in time, it might just make them wish they hadn't let their anger get the better of them. Number 2, use a low, steady tone of voice. There's a subtle power in how you speak, more than people usually realize. When someone comes at you aggressively, it's natural to want to raise your voice or match their intensity. But here's the trick: don't. Instead, drop your tone. Keep it low, steady, and even. Why? Because it's disarming in the most unexpected way. Think about it. When someone is riled up, they're feeding off emotion, yours, theirs, everyone's. They expect you to push back, to react with the same heat they're throwing at you. But when you hold steady, speaking calmly and clearly, it's like throwing water on a fire. Their aggression has nothing to latch onto. You're not giving them the satisfaction of a clash. Instead, you're showing composure, control, and an unshakable demeanor. That can be frustrating for them, but also humbling. This low, steady tone isn't just about controlling the situation, it's about controlling yourself. Staying grounded when someone's coming at you like a hurricane takes discipline. It's a stoic move in the purest sense, choosing how to respond instead of letting your emotions choose for you. You're showing that you won't let their chaos dictate your calm. And that's powerful. It's like saying, without actually saying it, I'm unbothered by your storm. Now, the beauty of this tactic is that it's versatile. Your words matter, sure, but the how often overshadows the what. The same sentence can land completely differently depending on the tone you use. When your voice is steady, it carries an undertone of confidence, of self-assuredness. It tells the other person, I'm not threatened by this situation. And people pick up on that energy, even if they don't consciously realize it. But it's not just about tone, it's also about pace. Don't rush. Rushing sounds nervous. Take your time with your words. Speak slowly, deliberately, as if you're choosing each one with care. This forces the other person to slow down too, whether they want to or not. Your steady tone acts like an anchor, pulling the entire conversation down to a manageable level. They're shouting. You're responding softly. They're rushing. You're pacing yourself. This contrast shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, you're in control without even trying to be. Here's a side bonus. Keeping your tone low and steady can have an unexpected effect on your own emotions. It's hard to stay angry, defensive, or anxious when you're speaking calmly. Your body and mind tend to follow the signals your voice sends out. So, by choosing to speak this way, you're not just diffusing their aggression, you're also grounding yourself. 2 wins in 1 move. Remember, people don't just hear words, they feel the energy behind them. And when your tone communicates calm strength, it says more than any argument ever could. It makes the other person pause, reflect, and often rethink their approach. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make them feel a twinge of regret for coming at you the way they did. Number 3, ask open-ended questions. One of the coolest ways to diffuse aggression and make someone stop in their tracks is by asking open-ended questions. It's like a secret weapon, not a physical one, obviously, but a mental tool that shifts the dynamic in any heated conversation. You know how most arguments feel like a back-and-forth ping-pong match, where everyone's just trying to smash the ball harder. Open-ended questions take that ball and, instead of smashing it, gently toss it back with curiosity. It's unexpected, and it completely changes the energy. The beauty of an open-ended question is that it invites the other person to think. And let's be real, when someone's being aggressive, they're usually not thinking, they're reacting. By asking something that requires more than a simple yes or no, you're forcing them to step out of that reactive mode. It's like flipping a switch in their brain, making them go, wait, what just happened here? For example, instead of snapping back at someone who's clearly upset, you might calmly ask, what's really on your mind, or how do you think we can work through this together? These types of questions aren't just conversation fillers, they're openings for connection. And here's the trick, they don't feel confrontational. Instead, they make the other person feel like their perspective actually matters, which, let's face it, is often what they want deep down. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but won't they just keep ranting? Maybe. But here's the thing, ranting without resistance often loses steam. Aggression thrives on pushback. If they're expecting a fight and you give them curiosity, it's like throwing water on a fire. They may still be angry, sure, but now they're engaging with you on a different level. There's also something incredibly powerful about showing genuine curiosity in the middle of conflict. It's disarming in the best way possible. Aggressive people often expect aggression in return. It's almost like they've braced themselves for a war of words. When you drop the metaphorical sword and offer them space to share their thoughts, it's a move they didn't see coming. And here's the kicker, it subtly puts the ball back in their court. They're now the ones who need to think, explain, or justify their stance. It's not about trapping them, it's about slowing things down so both of you can breathe a little. Another underrated perk of open-ended questions? They buy you time. Instead of firing off a reaction, you're giving yourself a moment to pause and think. That pause is golden because it keeps you from saying something you might regret later. It's like a mental buffer, and in a heated situation, those few seconds can be a lifesaver. And let's not forget the Stoic philosophy behind all this. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, they'd totally approve. Staying calm and curious in the face of aggression is like the ultimate flex of self-control. You're not just reacting, you're choosing your response with intention. Open-ended questions aren't just words, they're tools for maintaining your own inner peace while subtly encouraging the other person to drop their defenses. So, next time you're caught in the storm of someone else's aggression, try it. Toss out an open-ended question and watch the temperature drop. It might just leave them wondering how you managed to stay so composed, and maybe, just maybe, they'll feel a little sorry for losing their cool in the first place. Number 4, reframe their words constructively. When someone's coming at you with aggression, it can feel like you're being hit with a wave of harsh words. But here's the trick, instead of letting their words knock you down, why not flip the script and reframe what they're saying in a more constructive way? Think of it like catching a baseball and throwing it right back, except this time, you're catching their aggression and redirecting it into something productive, calm, and even helpful. The beauty of reframing is that it takes the power out of their hands and puts it in yours. They might be throwing insults, criticisms, or heated accusations at you, but you don't have to absorb their negativity. Instead, take a step back and look at what's being said from a different angle. It's like stepping out of the emotional swamp and seeing the conversation from a higher perspective. What do their words really mean beneath all that anger? Is there a hint of frustration? A desire to be heard? Maybe even a need for validation that they're not expressing properly? Reframing doesn't mean you're ignoring or dismissing what they're saying. It's not about pretending their anger doesn't exist. It's about interpreting their words in a way that reduces the emotional charge while still addressing the issue at hand. So, when they say something harsh, you could respond with something like, "I hear you're upset about X, and I can understand why that would bother you." By doing this, you're acknowledging their feelings without getting sucked into the emotional chaos. You're also giving them a space to feel heard, which, paradoxically, might be exactly what's needed to calm them down. Now, the key here is to stay grounded in your own responses. Reframing isn't just about turning their words into something more palatable for you, it's about guiding the conversation to a place where both of you can discuss things more openly and rationally. The more calmly you reframe, the more likely they are to start seeing their own words differently. If they realize they're not going to provoke you, the aggressive energy tends to fizzle out on its own. Another benefit of reframing is that it can open up the possibility for a productive conversation. Instead of turning the exchange into a battle of egos, you transform it into an opportunity for dialogue. By reframing what they say, you're subtly shifting the focus from attack to understanding. It's like changing the lens through which you both are viewing the situation. Maybe their words are laced with frustration, but underneath it, there's something valid that you can address. Think of reframing as a soft skill that requires you to be aware of your own emotions and the other person's. It's about understanding that aggression doesn't always come from a place of malice, it can come from vulnerability, from a need to be seen or understood. When you start looking at the root of the aggression rather than just the outward expression, you give yourself the power to respond in a way that diffuses the situation rather than escalating it. So, next time someone throws their verbal punches at you, try not to react. Instead, take a deep breath, reframe their words, and steer the conversation to calmer waters. It's a game changer. You won't just make them rethink their approach, you might just make them sorry for their aggression in the first place. Number 5, acknowledge their emotions without agreeing. When someone's in your face, fired up and ready to argue, the last thing they expect is understanding. It throws them off balance, like pulling the rug out from under their aggression. But here's the nuance: you're not agreeing with them, you're simply saying, "Hey, I see you. I get that you're feeling this way." That's it. No need to validate their point if you don't agree with it, just validate the feeling behind it. Let's break this down. People crave acknowledgement. When someone's angry or upset, there's usually an emotional weight behind it, a frustration, a fear, maybe even a sense of injustice. By recognizing that emotion, you're telling them, "I hear you," without giving up your own stance. This isn't about conceding ground, it's about diffusing tension. It's a subtle but effective move that shows you're not dismissing their humanity, even if you disagree with their perspective. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You've got to be careful with your words and your tone. If you sound patronizing or fake, it'll backfire instantly. People can sniff out insincerity like a bloodhound. So instead of generic phrases like, "I understand you're upset," try something a little more tailored. Reflect back what they're expressing, but keep it neutral. For example, you might say something like, "It sounds like you're really frustrated about this." Simple, right? But incredibly powerful. This approach works because it taps into the psychology of anger. Most of the time, people don't just want to yell, they want to be heard. When you acknowledge their emotions, you're giving them that, and it often takes the wind out of their sails. It's hard to stay full-on aggressive when someone's actively trying to understand where you're coming from. But let's be clear, acknowledging doesn't mean apologizing, agreeing, or backing down. It's not about giving them the satisfaction of winning. You're not saying they're right, you're saying their feelings are valid, even if their perspective isn't. And there's a huge difference between the two. The beauty of this technique is that it keeps you in control of the situation. You're not reacting emotionally, you're responding thoughtfully. That's a Stoic move through and through. Here's another thing: acknowledging their emotions can actually shift the tone of the interaction. It turns a heated exchange into something a little more human. You're essentially inviting them to calm down and have a real conversation instead of a shouting match. You're steering the ship without them even realizing it. And here's the kicker: when you handle it this way, it subtly forces them to reflect on their behavior. Most people don't expect calm and composed acknowledgement when they're being aggressive. When they get it, it often makes them second-guess their approach. That little moment of reflection, that's where the seeds of regret start to grow. It's not instant, but it's there. And you didn't even have to raise your voice or compromise your own position. Number 6, avoid reacting defensively. When someone's coming at you with aggressive energy, the natural urge is to fight back, right? Your instinct is probably screaming, "Defend yourself." Whether that's through words, body language, or just throwing up a wall of attitude. But here's the kicker: reacting defensively is exactly what an aggressive person expects. It's like handing them fuel for their fire. If you want to flip the script and make them feel, well, kind of ridiculous for coming at you so hard, the trick is to not react defensively at all. I know what you're thinking. Not react defensively? What am I supposed to do, just stand there? Not quite. It's less about doing nothing and more about how you respond. When you react defensively, even if it's subtle, like raising your voice, explaining yourself in a rush, or immediately countering their argument, it signals one thing: you feel threatened. And that's blood in the water for aggression. Defensiveness is like shouting, "Hey, you're getting to me." Even if you don't say it outright, the vibe leaks through. And trust me, that's exactly what an aggressive person thrives on. Instead, think of the whole situation like a wave crashing against a rock. If you're solid and unmoving, the wave eventually loses momentum. That's the vibe you're going for. Instead of throwing up verbal shields, let their aggression roll off you. Stay calm. Breathe. Respond, don't react. If they're lobbing accusations or throwing shade, don't feel the need to immediately explain yourself. Let the words hang in the air for a moment. Sometimes, silence is more powerful than the sharpest comeback. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you don't react defensively, something fascinating happens. The aggressor starts to feel off balance. Why? Because they're expecting a sparring partner, and you're refusing to put on the gloves. It's like they've shown up to a tennis match and you're just standing there, cool as a cucumber, watching their ball bounce past. They might even feel a little embarrassed. That's the power of staying composed. It flips the focus back on them. Another thing to keep in mind, defensiveness can make you say things you don't mean. When emotions are running high, it's easy to blurt out a weak excuse, an exaggerated claim, or worse, something hurtful. But when you resist the urge to defend, you stay in control of your words. And in moments of conflict, control is everything. Stoics were big on this idea. They believed that our true power lies in how we choose to respond. By avoiding defensiveness, you're not just staying calm, you're showing strength. You're saying, without saying it, I don't need to defend myself to you. I'm solid in who I am. So next time someone comes at you with aggressive energy, pause. Instead of scrambling to defend your ground, stand firm in it. Watch how the energy shifts, and watch them start to wonder why their words didn't hit the way they thought they would. You're unshakable, and that's a power no amount of aggression can break. Number 7, use humor to diffuse tension. When you're in a heated moment with someone who's aggressive, the last thing you might feel like doing is cracking a joke. But here's the thing, humor is a surprisingly powerful tool in these situations. It's like having a pressure release valve on a boiling pot. When the tension is rising, humor can diffuse it in a way that's almost magical, and the best part? You're still staying in control of the situation. Now, this isn't about making light of the issue or laughing it off entirely. That's not what we're after here. Instead, it's about using humor as a way to break the ice, disarm the aggression, and shift the tone of the conversation. When you introduce a bit of levity into an intense exchange, it does something remarkable. It makes everyone, including you, step out of the emotional swirl for a moment. It's like pressing pause and allowing everyone to breathe before continuing. Humor interrupts the pattern of anger and opens up a new possibility for connection. Here's the trick, when someone's being aggressive, their emotional energy is high, and everything they say feels like a punch. But when you introduce humor in a gentle, non-confrontational way, you're showing them that you're not going to react to their energy. It's like you're saying, I'm not taking this too seriously, so maybe you shouldn't either. The right kind of humor doesn't belittle them or the situation, it just lightens the mood and invites everyone to reset. Let's be clear though, humor isn't about undermining the seriousness of the conversation or using it as a distraction. It's about releasing the grip of aggression so you can move forward without being trapped in an emotional deadlock. A well-timed lighthearted remark can shift the focus, allow both parties to step back, and even make the other person feel a bit silly for getting so worked up in the first place. After all, humor has this magical quality of cutting through the tension without adding fuel to the fire. The key here is knowing when to use humor and how to deliver it. It's not about cracking jokes every few seconds to avoid the issue, but rather sprinkling in a touch of wit that shifts the atmosphere. You don't need to be a stand-up comedian, just someone who can see the absurdity of the situation and call it out. That's where the real power of humor lies, it's in the subtle shift of perspective. It shows that you're not fazed, that you're not stuck in the emotional chaos, and that the tension can be relieved without making a scene. What's even more interesting is that humor can bring you closer to the person who's being aggressive. They might come into the conversation looking to dominate, but if you make them laugh, even if it's just a little, you humanize the interaction. You're no longer an opponent to argue with, you're someone who's able to handle the situation with grace and humor. It makes them take a step back and reconsider their approach. It's a clever way to regain control of the conversation without raising your voice or escalating things. So next time you're facing an aggressive person, don't just brace yourself for the verbal barrage. Try throwing in a little humor, just enough to shake things up. It's not about dismissing their anger, but about offering them a new way of seeing the situation. Humor can turn a tense standoff into a moment of calm, and you might just find that the aggression dissolves into something much more manageable. Number 8. Express understanding and empathy. Here's the thing about empathy, it's not just some fluffy, feel-good concept people throw around. It's a tool, a strategy, and, frankly, a little bit of a superpower when dealing with aggression. Why? Because empathy doesn't fight fire with fire. It doesn't raise its fists or yell back. It sits in the calm center of the storm and says, "I see you. I get it." And those 5 words, spoken or unspoken, can be transformative. When someone's angry or aggressive, what they're really doing is broadcasting their emotions in the loudest way possible. Beneath the raised voice, harsh words, or clenched fists, there's usually something raw, a frustration, a hurt, or even fear. Expressing understanding and empathy doesn't mean you're excusing their behavior or agreeing with their point of view. No, it's about recognizing their humanity in that moment. And when you do that, you strip away some of their aggression's power. Let's talk about how this actually works. First off, understanding is about listening, not fixing. You're not swooping in with solutions or trying to convince them of anything. Instead, you're reflecting their emotions back to them in a way that shows you're tuned in. Simple phrases like, "I can see this is really upsetting for you," or "It sounds like this has been weighing on you," can be surprisingly effective. They're like tiny olive branches, signals that you're not here to battle, but to understand. And empathy? That's the next level. Empathy takes understanding and adds heart to it. It's not just saying, "I see you're angry." It's saying, "I can imagine how frustrating that must feel." See the difference? One acknowledges the emotion, the other steps into it, even if just for a moment. When you express empathy, you're not just recognizing their feelings, you're connecting with them. And connection has this weird way of softening aggression. But here's the catch, it's got to be genuine. People can spot fake empathy a mile away, and nothing fuels aggression faster than feeling dismissed or patronized. So, you've got to mean it. That doesn't mean you need to pour your heart out or get overly emotional. Just be authentic. Let your tone match your words. Speak slowly, with intention. Leave space for silence, if needed. Sometimes, it's not about saying the perfect thing, but just being there in the moment, holding space for them to unload. When you approach aggression with empathy, it creates a shift. You're no longer an adversary in their eyes, you're someone who's trying to meet them halfway. And that's disarming. It's hard to stay angry at someone who's actively trying to understand you. It forces a pause, even if it's just a split second. In that pause, something changes. Maybe it's small, maybe they don't even realize it, but they feel heard. And when someone feels heard, they're far more likely to calm down and, later, reflect on their behavior. The beauty of expressing empathy is that it doesn't just help them, it helps you, too. It keeps you grounded, keeps your own emotions in check. And at the end of the day, that's what being stoic is all about, mastering yourself, no matter what chaos is thrown your way. Number 9. Stay silent and let them overextend. Silence. It's a weapon that's as sharp as it is invisible. When someone's coming at you with aggression, words flying, tone sharp, maybe even gestures getting a little too animated, the urge to jump in and match their energy can feel almost overwhelming. But here's the thing, when you choose to stay silent instead, you're not just withholding words, you're pulling the rug out from under them. Let's talk about what happens when you stay quiet. First, silence creates space. And not just any space, the kind that makes the other person a little uncomfortable. You know that feeling when you've said too much, and the other person just stares at you, not giving you anything to work with? That's the power you're tapping into. Silence isn't passive, it's incredibly active. It puts the ball entirely in their court, leaving them to figure out what to do next. And, spoiler alert, aggressive people aren't great at handling that kind of power shift. When you're silent, they might start to overextend. They might talk more, repeat themselves, or even escalate their aggression, all in an attempt to get a reaction out of you. Why? Because silence feels unnatural to them in that moment. Aggressive energy thrives on friction, on push and pull dynamics. Without that, it loses momentum. Imagine their words as a swing. It's only effective if it hits something. But if it doesn't, they're just swinging at air, exhausting themselves. Here's another thing: silence makes them hyper-aware of their own behavior. Think about it. When someone's yelling or making a big scene, they're often so caught up in the heat of the moment that they don't even realize how over the top they sound. Your silence acts like a mirror. It forces them to hear their own voice, their own tone, without any distractions. And honestly, that realization can be embarrassing. But let's be clear, this isn't about being smug or trying to win. Silence isn't about rubbing their mistakes in their face. It's about letting the situation de-escalate naturally. Sometimes, when you stay quiet, the aggressive person starts to backpedal on their own. They might realize they've gone too far, or they might just run out of steam. Either way, your silence allows them to come to their own conclusion without feeling like they've been defeated. And that's a subtle, but powerful, way to get someone to reflect on their actions. Now, staying silent isn't easy. It takes discipline. Your ego will beg you to jump in, to defend yourself, to set the record straight. But here's the secret: silence isn't weakness. It's the ultimate show of strength. It says, without saying it, I don't need to play this game. I'm above it. And that's a statement that carries more weight than any argument ever could. So, next time someone's coming at you with all their fiery energy, try it. Stay quiet. Let them talk themselves into a corner. Let them overextend. And when they finally run out of things to say, you'll find yourself standing there, calm and unshaken. It's a power move like no other. Number 10. Repeat their words neutrally to reflect their behavior. Sometimes, when someone's coming at you with aggression, the best response isn't to argue or defend yourself. Instead, it can be surprisingly effective to mirror what they're saying, but in a neutral, non-defensive way. This technique is called repeating their words neutrally, and it's a powerful tool to both disarm their anger and make them reflect on their own behavior. It's like holding up a mirror to them, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that invites self-awareness. Here's how it works: when someone aggressively unloads their words on you, instead of reacting impulsively or getting defensive, you simply repeat what they said, back to them, without any added emotional charge. You don't exaggerate, you don't soften the blow, you just reflect their words in a calm, collected manner. By doing this, you're doing a few things at once. First, you're showing them that you're listening. Aggressive people often feel like they're not being heard. They're usually so caught up in their own emotions that they don't even realize they might be overwhelming the conversation. When you mirror their words back, you signal that you're paying attention to what they're saying, but you're not immediately reacting. You're creating a pause, a space, where they have a chance to reconsider what they've just said. Second, this technique forces them to hear their own words as if from a third-party perspective. Aggression often clouds judgment. When they say something heated, it's all coming from their emotional state, and they may not even fully realize how harsh they're being. By repeating their words neutrally, you make them confront their own tone and message. It's a subtle way to put the mirror up and ask, Is this really how you want to express yourself? Often, when they hear their own words, the weight of their anger becomes more apparent to them, and they may start to rethink the way they've been speaking. Let's dig deeper into the power of this approach. When you repeat their words, you don't interrupt them, you don't dismiss them, and you certainly don't escalate things by matching their intensity. You remain calm, neutral, and composed. This can be disorienting for someone who's used to getting a rise out of others. Instead of getting the conflict they expect, they get a calm reflection of their own aggression, which, over time, can start to deflate their fiery demeanor. It's like pulling the rug out from under their emotional tirade without them even realizing it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't this just make me sound like a robot or someone who doesn't care? Not at all. The key is in how you deliver it. You're not parroting their words in a mocking way or using an overly formal tone. You're simply repeating what they've said, but without the emotional edge. It's about staying in control of your emotional responses and creating an opportunity for them to see their own behavior from a different perspective. When done right, it's a subtle but effective way to prompt self-reflection. Another benefit is that it can slow down the conversation. Aggressive exchanges are fast-paced and often filled with rapid-fire accusations. When you calmly repeat their words, you break that momentum. You're slowing down the conversation, creating a moment of pause and reflection. This gives both of you time to regain your composure, especially if things are getting heated. So next time you're faced with aggression, remember that sometimes the best response is not to react, but to reflect. By repeating their words neutrally, you give them the space to reconsider their approach, all while maintaining control of the situation. It's a quiet yet powerful tool that often leads them to rethink not just what they said, but how they said it. And in many cases, that shift in perspective can make them sorry for their aggression. Number 11, point out contradictions gently. The art of spotting contradictions, it's a fine line to walk, isn't it? On one hand, it can be a powerful way to make someone reflect on their behavior or words. But on the other hand, if you come off too blunt or smug, you'll just pour gasoline on the fire. That's why the key word here is gently. You're not trying to call them out like a judge slamming a gavel. You're inviting them to see things differently without making them feel attacked. Here's the thing, when people are aggressive, they're often running on emotion rather than logic. And emotions? They're messy, inconsistent, and full of contradictions. Your job isn't to pick apart every little inconsistency like some kind of verbal sniper. Instead, it's to guide the conversation in a way that helps them notice the gaps in their own logic, without them feeling like you're rubbing their face in it. So how do you do it? Start by staying calm and curious. Let your tone be light, almost as if you're genuinely puzzled. Curiosity has this magical way of making your words feel less threatening. For example, you could say something like, "I might be misunderstanding, but earlier you said X, and now it sounds like Y. Can you help me understand how those two fit together?" You're not accusing them of anything, you're inviting them to explain. That's disarming. Notice what's happening here. You're not pointing the finger. You're holding up a mirror. People are way more likely to rethink their stance when they feel like they've discovered the inconsistency themselves rather than having it shoved in their face. It's about planting a seed, not dropping a boulder. Another tip? Pay attention to your phrasing. Words like "help me understand" or "I'm curious about" work wonders because they keep the focus on you, not them. It feels collaborative, not confrontational. On the flip side, avoid phrases like "you're contradicting yourself" or "that doesn't make sense," which can come off as combative or dismissive. The goal is to guide, not to shame. This approach works because it forces a pause. Aggression thrives on momentum, it's all heat and motion. But when you gently point out a contradiction, it's like throwing a pebble in the gears. The other person has to stop, if only for a moment, to reconcile what they've said. And in that pause, there's space for reflection. Sometimes, that's all it takes to shift the tone of the conversation. And let's not forget, staying gentle and composed when pointing out contradictions also protects your own peace of mind. You're not getting dragged into the emotional whirlwind. You're staying steady, choosing your words carefully, and maintaining control. That's a Stoic move, plain and simple. At the end of the day, people don't respond well to being called out in a harsh way. But when you nudge them gently, showing them the cracks in their logic without being accusatory, it's a whole different story. It's a subtle yet powerful way to turn the tide, making them pause and, hopefully, reflect on their behavior. And that reflection? That's where the regret starts to creep in. Number 12, maintain eye contact confidently. Eye contact. It's one of those things that seems simple, just look at the person, right? But when someone's being aggressive, keeping your gaze steady is anything but easy. It's tempting to glance away, look down, or even pretend to focus on something else entirely. But here's the deal, maintaining confident eye contact isn't just about looking at someone, it's about sending a silent, unshakable message. When you hold eye contact in the middle of a heated situation, it says, I see you. I hear you. And I'm not intimidated. You're not backing down, but you're also not engaging in the same aggressive energy they're throwing at you. It's like planting your feet firmly on the ground without lifting a single finger. Your eyes do all the work. Now, let's get one thing straight. Confident eye contact isn't about staring someone down like you're in a contest to see who blinks first. That's not confidence, that's intimidation, and it'll likely escalate the tension. The key is to stay relaxed. Let your gaze be steady but soft. Think of it as standing your ground emotionally, not trying to overpower them. It's a balance, a subtle but powerful way to communicate that you're unfazed, even if they're coming at you full force. Why does this work? Because most aggressive people expect you to crumble. They're looking for signs of weakness, whether it's in your voice, your posture, or your eyes. When you maintain calm, unwavering eye contact, it throws them off. Suddenly, they're not as sure of their own dominance. That crack in their confidence? It's subtle, but it's there. Another fascinating thing about eye contact is that it forces connection. When you look someone in the eyes, you're acknowledging their humanity, even in the middle of conflict. That's powerful. It's hard to keep yelling or being aggressive when the other person is looking at you with steady, composed energy. It creates a moment where, even if they don't realize it, they're confronted with their own behavior. But here's the trick, it's not just about them. Maintaining eye contact helps you, too. It grounds you in the moment, reminding you to stay present. Instead of letting your mind race with defensive thoughts or getting caught up in the heat of the moment, you're anchoring yourself. It's a quiet form of self-control. And self-control? That's pure stoicism in action. Let's not forget the confidence boost it gives you. When you look someone directly in the eyes, you're affirming to yourself that you're not afraid. It's like a mental pep talk without words. Over time, this habit builds resilience. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes to face any situation with composure and strength. So, next time someone's aggression starts to rise, meet their eyes. Don't flinch. Don't glare. Just hold their gaze with calm, steady assurance. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But that quiet confidence, it speaks volumes. And trust me, they'll notice. Number 13, end the conversation if they refuse to calm down. There's a point in almost every aggressive conversation where you realize that no matter how calmly you respond, no matter how much you try to steer the dialogue into calmer waters, the other person simply won't back down. It's frustrating, but here's the truth, sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself, and for the situation, is to walk away. Ending the conversation is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's often the strongest move you can make. And more importantly, it might just be the thing that makes them start to reconsider their behavior. When someone is caught up in their anger, they're not truly engaging in a productive conversation. They're on autopilot, driven by emotion, and their words are more about venting than solving anything. So, continuing to engage at that point only fuels the fire. You're not going to reason with them when they're in that state. The argument will only get louder, more intense, and more damaging. The power is in knowing when to disengage before things go off the rails completely. Imagine this: no matter how much you stay calm, how much you try to redirect the conversation or offer solutions, the other person keeps escalating. It's exhausting, right? You can feel your energy draining as they keep piling on the negativity. This is when it's time to pull back. Ending the conversation doesn't mean you're abandoning the issue or conceding defeat. It means you're setting a boundary. You're recognizing that the conversation has hit a dead end and that continuing it will only harm both of you more than help. When you decide to end the conversation, it's important to do it firmly, but not in a way that invites more conflict. Don't slam the door in their face or give them an ultimatum. Instead, say something calm, but resolute, something like, "I can see that we're not getting anywhere right now, and I'm not going to continue this conversation until we can both speak calmly." The goal is to make it clear that you won't participate in a conversation that's driven by aggression. You're setting a standard for how you expect to be treated, and you're telling them that their behavior won't be tolerated, but you're also leaving the door open for a future conversation when emotions have cooled. The beauty of ending the conversation in this way is that it forces a shift. You're no longer part of the emotional chaos, and by walking away, you show that you're not afraid to stand your ground. It's a silent form of control, where you're taking the power back without raising your voice or getting defensive. It sends a message that you value respect and constructive communication, and you won't engage in anything less. Also, when you step away, you're not just protecting yourself, you're giving them the space to reflect. In the heat of the moment, people don't often take the time to consider how their words might be coming across. But once the conversation ends, they're left with their own thoughts. They might start to feel the weight of their own aggression and begin to question if it was worth it. That pause could be exactly what they need to reset and rethink their approach. In some cases, this time apart is exactly what's needed for them to come to the realization that their behavior was out of line. And when they return to the conversation, if they do, they'll likely come with a different, more open mindset. They might apologize, or at the very least, recognize that their aggression wasn't productive. In the end, ending the conversation when things are getting out of hand isn't just about protecting your peace. It's a subtle yet effective way to make them regret their aggressive stance and approach the situation more thoughtfully next time. Thank you for watching. Handling aggression with composure and wisdom is a true reflection of inner strength. By mastering these verbal strategies inspired by Stoic philosophy, you can diffuse tension and maintain control of any situation. If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more powerful insights. Share this video with someone who could use these tools to navigate difficult interactions. Remember, true power lies in staying calm and making others regret their aggression without losing your integrity. Stay composed, stay resilient, and keep building your inner control. See you in the next video.